All right, so again, my name is Jessica Biggott, and I was this year's communications intern for the Cayuga Lake Watershed Network. So I did a lot of really great things during my internship this summer, but I wanted to talk about one really specific challenge that I faced, and that was communicating about uncertainty. So uncertainty is a feature of science that will never go away, whether we like it or not. But oftentimes in the media, science is often presented as a concrete fact, not subject for a debate. In schools, this is often perpetuated as well by teaching science as if it were a series of answers and not a method of asking questions about the world around us. In scientific communication, there's a fine line between acknowledging these uncertainties and undermining what is certain by doing so. So what do we do when we have the duty to communicate about a topic that is riddled with so much uncertainty? And how do we navigate this fine line without obscuring what we do know? So again, this summer, I worked at the Cayuga Lake Watershed Network as their harmful algal blooms communicator. So this mostly entailed communicating information about where harmful algal blooms, which I will now refer to interchangeably as HABs or cyanoblooms. So where HABs were on the lake, but it also included relevant updates about HABs, like any recent scientific findings or any new management practices. So even though cyanobacteria, which are the single-celled organisms that compromise HABs, have been around on Earth since long before humans have, HABs themselves still reside on the frontier of science. There's a lot that we still don't know about them, including what causes them, how to get rid of them, and why they produce toxins. So how do I effectively disseminate this information about a subject that is riddled with so much uncertainty? To start, I attended citizen science training sessions for our volunteers called HABs Harriers. Here they're trained on how to monitor designated zones of the lake for harmful algal blooms. During these sessions, I listened in to see what kinds of questions people had. A lot of these had to do with the logistics of being a HABs Harrier and were pretty easily resolved, but a lot of them weren't. These included questions about why HABs are here, why they produce toxins, and how to get rid of them, all the things that we were uncertain about. I also prompted readers of the weekly newsletter for the Watershed Network to send in any questions that they might have, and from this I received one single question about whether or not cyanobacteria were beneficial in any way, or if they're just all bad. So from this, I constructed a Q&A. This gave me a better idea of where frustrations with uncertainties may lie, and I used those questions to construct a Q&A. This Q&A had two goals. One was to iron out any uncertainties and alleviate any frustrations that might accompany them. And then second, I really wanted to spur curiosity about HABs using these uncertainties. So the very first thing I did when answering these questions was to lay out what is known. Doing the opposite can really obscure the message that I'm trying to get across. So when I was talking about the factors that lead to HABs that were identified by the DEC, I made sure to list the 4 that we knew first before talking about any challenges and finding further factors. The second thing I made sure to do was frame all of the percentages and probabilities in a positive light. So instead of saying that we are 40% uncertain about the link between phosphorus and HABs, I said that we were 60% certain. Framing in a positive light can lead to feelings of hopelessness, like we will never get to the bottom of HABs, and that was exactly what I was trying to avoid. And then additionally, I made sure when answering all these questions to lay out why uncertainties are there in the first place and what we need in order to achieve higher levels of certainty, like data or more research. This set expectations about what science is and what we can expect and how certain we could possibly be. And like I said earlier, perceptions of science can greatly sway how we perceive messages containing uncertainty. I also utilized further newsletters to mitigate any feelings of anxiety that might stem from these uncertainties. A lot of questions were asked about water quality and what would happen if a bloom appeared near an intake site. And when researching that, all of the sources I found either didn't directly answer the question or answered in a way that was incredibly difficult to understand as someone who's never set foot in a water filtration site before. So I set up an interview with Bolden Point Water Systems, and there I talked to the production manager who told me about his plan for what would happen if a harmful algal bloom appeared near the intake site. And so I was finally given a concrete answer, which I could then send out in a newsletter and assure people that their water would likely not be compromised by HABs. So in my final newsletter, I decided to address the more human aspect of uncertainty, and that's eco-anxiety. Uncertainties are a part of everyday life. So here I discussed that, and I talked about ways to cope with eco-anxiety, whether if it was specifically about a HAB appearing in your backyard, or if it was more broadly about environmental degradation in general. And this shifted my overall message from something incredibly scientific to more personal and human. Uncertainty is a feature of science that will never go away. And as climate change progresses and as temperatures rise, we might see more unpredicted environmental consequences like we're seeing right now with HABs. This makes it even more important that communicators know how to handle uncertainty when communicating further messages, so that what we do know is not obscured by the unknown. Here are my references. Thank you.